In this lesson, we are going to look at adding and subtracting polynomials. So remember, with adding and subtracting fractions, we need to find a common denominator. So in the first question, it's pretty straightforward because they already have a common denominator. So we can go ahead and add the numerator in the first term plus the numerator in the second term. And we would get 4x plus 20. Now, looking at this one, we could reduce it. I could factor out a common 5. So sometimes they will reduce after you've added them together. You may be able to factor and reduce after that. So just be careful with that. That is an option. And then also state the restriction, x cannot equal -5. In this question, we have a denominator of 3/2, or 3n and 2n. So my lowest common denominator would consist of a 3 and a 2 and an n. So I have to make sure I include all numbers and variables from both terms and then combine them together. So I need a 3 and an n in the first term. In the second term, I have that 2. I already have an n, so I don't need the n twice. I only need the n once because both of them have one n. So my common denominator is 6n. So what do we have to do to 3 to get 6n? We have to multiply by, oops, I want that one. We have to multiply by 2, so I'm going to do the same to the top. What do I do to 2n to get 6n? I have to multiply by 3, so I'm going to do the same to the top. So we have 2 times n plus 1, and we have 3 times 3n minus 1, all over that denominator of 6n. So we would have 2n plus 2. So I'm going to expand brackets, and then I'm going to collect like terms, and that is my final result. And then my restriction would be n cannot equal 0. In this example, we have two different denominators. You need to treat these as a group. You can't blend them together. So my lowest common denominator would have to include an x plus 4 and an x minus 2. We have to have both of those binomials, so treat them as separate terms. So what do we multiply this one by? This one would need an x minus 2. We'll do the same to the numerator. This one would need to be multiplied by x plus 4. We would do the same to the numerator. So in this term, we would have the 1 times x minus 2, and we'd have the 3 times x plus 4. So in the numerator, I'm going to expand, so x minus 2 minus 3x minus 12. Don't forget this negative is going to apply to both terms. So it'd be negative 3x, and then negative 3 times 4 is negative 12. And so we would have minus 2x minus 14. If I factored that, I wouldn't be able to reduce, so I'm just going to leave it. And x cannot equal -4 or 2. Okay, in this example, I need to factor the second term before I find the common denominator. So you always want to factor first, because sometimes that common denominator appears in both. So when I factor a squared plus 7a plus 10, I see that a plus 5 is there, which is the same as the first term, so I don't need it twice. I need an a plus 5 that is contained in both terms, and I need an a plus 2. So this term would have to get multiplied by a plus 2. The second term does not need to be multiplied by anything because it already has that common denominator. So we're going to have 2a times a plus 2 plus 6a. So we will have 2a squared plus 4a plus 6a. And I see there's a common 2a, so let's take that out, and that would leave me with a plus 5, which I can then reduce with this term in the denominator. So like I said, make sure that you check for that. Sometimes you can simplify at the end. And the restriction is always based on the original question, so cannot be -5 or -2. Okay, it's not based on the final answer, it's based on the original question, your restrictions. Okay, in this one, 2 minus x and x minus 2 are kind of the same, but they're opposite in sign. So what we can do, instead of using both, we could take a negative out of this first one. So if I factor out a -1, that reverses the sign, so now it's x minus 2. So now I have a common denominator, and I can actually move this -1 just to the top. So my common denominator is x minus 2, and it would be -3. I'm moving that negative up to the 3, which is -1. So just be careful of that one, and x cannot equal 2. So that one is a little bit tricky. Just be careful. X minus 2, 2 minus x are not the same thing, so if you reverse one by factoring out a negative, then you can combine them together. So there's a few practice questions here at the end of the lesson, and then the answers are on that last page, so you can practice a few questions and then let me know if you have any issues.